Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. When we think about the ancient world, we usually picture these pristine marble statues, perfectly draped togas, guys having quiet intellectual debates. But the truth? Yeah, antiquity absolutely wasn't this sunlit paradise of pure logic and heroism. No way. It was deeply complex, gritty, and honestly just fiercely difficult. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain on those legends to reveal the sweat, the struggle, and the true resilience of the people who literally laid the foundations for our modern world.
To really understand this messy brilliance, we've got 4 hidden truths to cover. We'll look at surviving ancient Greece, Boudica's fight against the Roman Empire, the roots of ancient medicine, and finally, Sappho and erased voices.
All right, let's start with our first pillar, society. Surviving ancient Greece.
I want you to picture this. It's 450 BCE in Athens. And you're not a philosopher. You're just an average person. We've got this idealized expectation that an Athenian day was all about grand philosophy, the birth of democracy, keeping your white toga completely spotless. But the reality? The reality was severe sunburns, the constant lingering threat of being completely exiled, and chewing on rock-hard, stale barley bricks. I mean, it was a brutal daily grind.
Just think about your morning routine. Back then, it was basically a masterclass in discomfort. You wake up in a sweltering mud brick house that's literally been baking in the sun. Running water? Nope. You're hauling heavy clay jars from a public fountain. Breakfast is mazi, which is this dense, stale barley bread, and you dunk it in watered-down wine because the water isn't even safe to drink on its own. Skincare? Forget about soap. You'd rub olive oil onto your skin and scrape the dirt off with a curved metal blade called a strigil. And your wardrobe is just pinning an oversized linen rectangle to yourself and praying to the gods it holds together on your walk to the market.
And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the greatest myth of all about the so-called birthplace of democracy. We always celebrate Athens for giving power to the people, right? Well, look at the actual numbers. To vote, you had to be a male citizen over 18 born to Athenian parents, meaning women, foreigners, and slaves, who made up a massive 90% of the entire population, were completely excluded from the political process. So yes, it was a democracy, but only for a highly, highly exclusive club of 10%.
And hey, even if you were lucky enough to be in that 10%, you really had to watch your back. If you got too influential, too persuasive, or maybe you just annoyed the wrong people, boom, ostracism. Once a year, citizens could write a name on a broken piece of pottery, an ostracon. If you got enough votes, you were exiled from Athens for 10 whole years. No trial, no nothing. They basically invented cancel culture 2.5 millennia ahead of schedule. But, beneath all that politics and sunlit philosophy lies a much darker reality. Ancient Greece was fundamentally a slave society. Those guys debating ethics and justice in the town square, they could only do that because slaves, usually prisoners of war, were doing absolutely all the labor. Down in the silver mines of Laurion, slaves and, yes, even children worked in total, suffocating darkness, inhaling toxic dust just to fund the city's civic pride. It's a heavy thought, but the foundation of Western philosophy was literally built on the backs of people who were never allowed to matter.
Moving on to Pillar 2, Empire. Boudica against the Empire. Let's leave the heat of Greece and head north into the cold, damp forests of Britannia. Now, the crucial point here is exactly how this terrifying rebellion kicked off. It wasn't just some political disagreement, it was intensely, brutally personal. When King Prasutagus of the Iceni tribe died, he actually left his kingdom jointly to Rome and to his daughters, just trying to keep the peace. But Rome? They arrogantly ignored his will. They annexed the land, publicly flogged his widow, Queen Boudica, and violated her daughters right in front of her. Rome really thought this kind of psychological warfare would break a minor tribal woman. Instead, they awakened a lioness.
Boudica channeled that righteous fury and forged a massive, unified tribal army. And her retribution was just systematic and merciless. First, the Roman colony of Camulodunum was burned to ash, completely destroyed. Then, days later, the Roman governor, Suetonius, realizes he literally can't defend the wealthy jewel of Londinium, so he just abandons it. Boudicca's forces sweep in, eradicate the city, and butcher its inhabitants. Verulamium was next. Tens of thousands of Romans and their allies were slaughtered in this absolute storm of vengeance.
At its peak, Boudicca's army swelled to a staggering estimated size of 200,000 warriors. 200,000! These were farmers, hunters, mothers, all armed with sheer fury. But then came the final stand. Governor Suetonius chose his ground carefully, a narrow defile bordered by dense forest. He had barely 10,000 Roman legionaries, but they were highly disciplined and formed this unbreakable iron wall of shields and swords. In that tight terrain, the sheer overwhelming numbers of the Britons actually became a fatal trap. It led to a totally devastating defeat.
After the battle, Boudica just vanished. There was no parading her in chains through Rome. She either took poison or fell ill. We aren't entirely sure. But that physical disappearance, that's exactly what allowed her to become a myth. Rome tried its hardest to erase her memory. But, as they say, history isn't just written by the victors. It's carved by those who dare to resist. Her defiant, I will not kneel spirit became an immortal symbol of resistance that, honestly, still echoes today.
All right, let's shift gears to Pillar 3, science, the roots of ancient medicine.
So, from those brutal battlefields, let's step into the healing sanctuaries of antiquity. It is so easy for us today to just dismiss ancient medicine as mere superstition, right? But long before anyone knew what bacteria or viruses were, healers viewed illness through the lens of holistic imbalance. Sickness wasn't just some rogue cell. To them, it was a profound disruption in the harmony between your body, your mind, your soul, and nature itself. These healers firmly believed that to actually cure someone, you had to listen to the invisible forces just as carefully as you treated the physical, visible wounds.
Let's look at how this builds across completely different civilizations. It's fascinating. In Egypt, healing was all about realigning with Ma'at, or divine harmony. And they did this using spells, sure, but also advanced honey antiseptics. Over in India, Ayurveda focused on balancing the doshas. And get this, surgeons like Sushruta were performing complex rhinoplasty, nose jobs, 2,000 years ago. In China, wellness meant ensuring the free flow of qi and balancing yin and yang through things like acupuncture. And in Greece, it was about balancing the four humors. All of these incredible cultures were essentially laying the groundwork for what we now call modern integrative health. And you know, we absolutely cannot talk about ancient healing without talking about ritual. Whether we're looking at Native American smudging with sage, Egyptian incantations, or Greeks sleeping in temples just hoping for a healing dream, ritual gave structure to their suffering. It gave them a language for pain. And what's wild is that today, modern science actually studies this as the placebo effect. It's that profound, completely real physical healing impact that comes from belief, intention, and just feeling understood.
And that brings us to our final section. Pillar 4, art. Sappho and erased voices.
For this one, we're traveling to the ancient Greek island of Lesbos. We're going to explore a voice that history tried so desperately to silence. The poet Sappho was once incredibly famous. I mean, her work spanned 9 entire volumes in the Library of Alexandria. But history is fragile, really fragile. As empires eventually fell and cultural morals shifted, her openly emotional, highly sensual poems, especially the ones celebrating female love, were deemed dangerous. Her books were burned, censored, just lost to time. Today, she survives only in fragments, a line quoted in an ancient grammar book here, or miraculously some text discovered on papyrus wrapped around an Egyptian mummy there. It's like a giant puzzle, and her pieces were almost swept away forever. Now, what's really interesting about her words is just how radical they actually are. Think about it. At a time when giant epics were praising men at war, Sappho was writing in the first person, about the heart. She captures this raw, completely relatable, unrequited jealousy as she watches the woman she desires speak to a man. She took feeling and made it an art form. She wrote honestly and totally without apology,
about love and vulnerability in a society that, let's face it, often demanded women stay completely silent.
Plato himself even called her the 10th muse. She completely mastered the lyric poem, which, by the way, was meant to be sung to a lyre. She elevated love to this mythic, cosmic force right alongside the goddess Aphrodite. And her legacy? It's literally embedded into our everyday language. She gave us the words sapphic and lesbian, which come straight from her name and her home island. Despite centuries of attempted erasure, she became this enduring symbol of queer resilience and feminine artistry. She absolutely proved that a fiercely honest voice can echo across millennia.
So, from the exhausting daily grind of an everyday Athenian citizen, to the unstoppable fury of Boudica, to the holistic wisdom of ancient healers, and those beautifully surviving fragments of Sappho's love, the ancient world was just as messy, vibrant, and brutally real as our own. Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to chew on. 2,000 years from now, when people look back at our civilization, what parts of our modern reality will they completely misunderstand as just a myth? Really think about that. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning history.